There's a lot happening in the world of Linkin Park right now. The band is teasing a previously unreleased song called Friendly Fire, which features Chester on vocals, their beloved late frontman who passed away in 2017. Now, this song was recorded during the One More Light sessions also in 2017. Mike Shinoda also has a recent interview where he talks about a lot of what the band went through on their triumphant rise to fame and kind of the lessons they learned along the way. We're going to get to some of that. Now, the band started teasing this a few days ago with a lot of green imagery, which was unclear to fans. Everyone was wondering what was going to happen, and it does turn out the band is going to have this unreleased track coming out. Now, in this interview with Mike Shinoda, where he talks about the band, one of the interesting things he reveals is the group has gotten many, many millions of new fans in recent years. And I think that's interesting because one of the things that Linkin Park has been really great about is they've been releasing a lot of archival audio. They've been releasing a lot of anniversary album releases where you have demo versions of songs from Hybrid Theory, and they did it with Meteora as well. And I just think it's fascinating. They also have remixes on there. It's a great way to remember Chester. But they also, on the Meteora release, dropped a full-blown single, a song called Lost, which was a great song originally intended to be on the album, but it was held back, and there's an interesting story there as well. But this song really did very well for the band releasing it, and I think attracted a lot of people. And it really, the sound of that song perfectly encompassed what was going on, the sound of Linkin Park at that very time. This is a band that has constantly reinvented themselves. So when you hear that song Lost, it sounds just like that Meteora era Linkin Park. Now on to this new song, the previously unreleased track called Friendly Fire. We do now have a preview of it released just a short time ago earlier today by Linkin Park. In recent days, Linkin Park had been teasing some sort of an announcement on their social media with a green dot on a lot of pictures and then green borders on some of their social media posts. Now we know it's related to this song, Friendly Fire, recorded as part of their One More Light album recording sessions back in 2017. And you really listen to these songs differently when you know that Chester's no longer with us. There's a real different level of appreciation, and his voice sounds amazing. I mean, it always did. And the band evolved their sound into, by this time, a lot different from what we heard in their early career, which of course was much more nu metal influenced. And by the time they got to One More Light, they'd evolved into a much more modern sound. And of course, all of us are so grateful to the band for really releasing so much material over the years from Linkin Park's career. And what comes next for this group, whether or not there will ever be any sort of performances from the band. We have heard Mike Shinoda talk in the past about the potential for that, but obviously there haven't been any new developments. But what's interesting is Shinoda did say one thing in particular that I thought was really interesting, and I honestly agree with him, which is that they're never going to try to bring aboard someone who's really just mimicking Chester to mimic him. He says there may be some stylistic similarities, but he didn't want that. This is something he said on a live stream in an exchange with fans. So here is Mike Shinoda talking about that. Check this out.
Really weird and really interesting was, oh, my friend sounds a lot like Chester. Would you want to hear that? Probably not. I don't want to do, it's unlikely that I will want, that just feel weird. And by the way, P.S., I don't think your friend is as good as Chester. Like, they're probably not as good as him. So why would I want to work with somebody who's like a second-rate Chester? That'd be bad. Please no. There's a couple of exceptions. Like, I've heard people who have a little bit of the timbre of that kind of that style of a voice, and they're just good. If they're just good, then they're just good. But if they're like actively trying to sound that way, then no, I'm not gonna fuck with that. That's not gonna happen.
I agree with him there. I think if Linkin Park ever does anything in the future, you want to have a great vocalist. Nothing will ever compare to Chester, but you also don't want to have somebody who is attempting to kind of mimic him too much. Although there can be stylistic similarities, I think that's a great point. Now, Mike Shinoda recently spoke about Linkin Park's career in a special op-ed that I thought was really great as well. And he gives some interesting insight into how the band has been getting a lot of new fans, younger fans, a new generation of people who are really loving Linkin Park. I found this very interesting. Now, you see this picture here. He's kind of like really looking into the camera with a menacing look. He says, I was 25 and backstage on a tour when this photo was taken. Back then, there was a difference between the way I may act in a social situation with friends versus the person I was on a photo shoot or on stage with Linkin Park. Like many artists, I created a persona as a defense mechanism. I wasn't entirely comfortable being in the spotlight, so I developed a way I'd act around people. I think that comes across in a lot of the pictures at the time. I look a little more cocky, as if I'm trying to emulate the rappers that I grew up loving, such as Public Enemy. Thankfully, now I am a lot more at ease and have stopped that. Left to my own devices, I would have just stand still in the photo, but at this point, we'd had so many pictures for so many different publications that photographers would want a more unique composition. I was amenable to a relatively benign pose like this, but photographers would often want weirder stuff. Just act silly. Will you jump off this thing? Can you make this dumb face? I learned pretty quickly that if you took 100 normal pictures and one stupid one, it's the stupid one that they were going to put on the cover. We'd get so mad and eventually learn to stop. If they said, hey, could you do something crazy? We'd just say no. It's interesting. He says, my memories from that era are blurry, but we were definitely on a high. It was such a sprawling tour, and the last part of promoting Hybrid Theory was also recording our second album, Meteora. We were going from city to city all over the world without any breaks for 18 months. I was rarely home, to the extent that I let the lease go on my apartment. My stuff went into storage, and when I went back, I'd stay with my girlfriend. I didn't have a clue about the world yet, but was life-changing to taste new food, see new buildings, and experience other cultures. Later, he talked about the strange phenomenon he felt walking red carpets and being recognized by people. He says fame was never a priority, but it happened in the early days. We would pile the whole group into photos. If the photographer had it their way, it would just be Chester or me and Chester, but we wanted people to know that this band was all of us, not just the singers at the front. Linkin Park being well-known or well-regarded was a blessing, but would I have wanted the band to be successful without being recognizable? Probably. The fame aspect of my career always felt odd, to the extent that I did an art series in 2008 and 2009 called Glorious Excess, where it painted about celebrity culture, reality TV, Michael Jackson, Diana, Princess of Wales. At the time, I was standing on red carpets and a lot of celebrities and just thinking, wow, this is so weird. What a strange phenomenon. It felt fascinating and unnatural to be treated in a certain way because our music was popular. That's not to say I didn't enjoy the success of something that a lot of people had told us was not going to work. We felt vindicated, especially with the connection we had with our fans. As we got further into our career, everybody in the band adapted in different ways, but we always tried to look after each other. Each member of Linkin Park is very intelligent academically, but emotionally smart too, which was fundamental at times. We toured nonstop for the first 2 rounds, and kudos to Brad and Dave and Rob, who took stock of how our lives had changed and suggested we had a break. They would say things like, aren't we lucky to have done this? But don't we also have a lot of responsibility now? That subtle approach to communicating was very powerful and led us to the decision to slow down for a minute. Without thinking, I don't think that I would have stopped and reflected. There's rarely a period where I'm a loss for a creative idea to pursue. I'm always writing songs, working with the band, scoring a movie, painting for fun. I just kept going. Different people deal with grief in different ways. My coping style was to stay in motion through music and art. So he's talking about his coping mechanisms there and also taking a lot of time away. And the way I'm reading this is that they've really kind of just been sitting back and evaluating and appreciating Linkin Park and remembering Chester and and Mike as well, but also he's been just staying busy and staying focused on creativity. He's an extremely talented songwriter and creative person. So, we've seen all of the great work that he's done. And, I'm just grateful that the band is releasing things from their archives. That is something that not everyone does. There are a lot of artists who have passed on where they haven't done that. Or not to the extent even that Linkin Park has, where we've gotten so many amazing demos, even versions of Linkin Park's music with alternate lyrics. I highly recommend checking out those special edition versions of Hybrid Theory and Meteora they did. They're on streaming services as well. If you haven't heard Lost, and it sounds like we're going to get this unreleased song as well, Lost did big things on the charts, so it's going to probably do the same with this song, Friendly Fire. And also, I've got an incredible podcast out with John 5 talking about his amazing story joining Motley Crue on Patreon at the link in the description. One of the best episodes ever. Thank you so much. That's your latest update from Rockfeed. Be sure to hit that subscribe button with notifications on for the latest news and updates.